For the Anbernic RG405M and the Retroid Pocket 2S, neither win. The Retroid Pocket Flip is the winner. But let's talk about all three. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Joey's Retro Handhelds. I'm Joey, and today we're going to be talking about the Anbernic RG405M versus the Retroid Pocket 2S, and why it's the Retroid Pocket Flip that's the actual winner of the three. I said in my Retroid Pocket 2S review video to ask me in about a month or so which one I picked between the 2S and the RG405M. I have a daily driver, of course, and so it was between the two of them at that point. But then I got the Retroid Pocket Flip, and this dark horse of a device came out of nowhere and became my #1 daily driver out of all three. I did a very short video when I had just got this device a few weeks back, and at that point I had only just started using it and I wasn't really sure where it fit in, although I found a few different spots like Nintendo DS and PSP games where it seemed to excel. But then I started to use it more and more, and I found that it became the #1 device for me for everything. So as a special treat today, we're going to stay true to what the purpose of the video is and compare the Anbernic RG405M and the Retroid Pocket 2S, but we're going to add a third one in for the Retroid Pocket Flip to see if I might be able to convince you to see what I'm seeing when I'm playing this device. Now, just in case you've been living under a rock, one of the first things that you knew about the Flip was that there was a lot of hinge issues at the start. A lot of people's hinges were cracking or breaking and things of that nature. I have the watermelon colored Flip here, and that one didn't have those issues at all. Other colors seem to suffer from that issue, but the watermelon color seemed to be fine. And either way, since then, Retroid has since fixed the hinge issue on their newer models, so anything that'd be purchased nowadays would come with a reinforced hinge, and I'll share a picture of what that looks like, but it's just not something you have to worry about anymore. So pricing wise, the cheapest of the three is of course going to be the Retroid Pocket 2S, and that's at $99 for the 3GB version. Next up is the Retroid Pocket Flip at $164 US, and both of these devices are straight off of Retroid's website. And then lastly, we have the Anbernic RG405M at $168 US from Anbernic's site directly. Now, the 405M has a lot more chances to be cheaper because it's on a lot more different websites. You have resellers, you have AliExpress, and you have all of that likely have a lot of discounts and a lot of times where it could be a lot cheaper than it is today. I think I saw it one other time at $110 US, which is just insane. But either way, I think right now the Retroid Pocket 2S, then the Flip, then the 405M is the standard pricing tiers. But I will say, if you're shopping purely based on price and value, then the easy answer for today is going to be the Retroid Pocket 2S, because I don't think anything beats it. And that goes for almost all devices that we can pick from. Now, in the case of the RG405M versus the 2S, let's talk about the actual differences here. The first, of course, is the 405M has a 4-inch 640 by 480 screen, and the 2S has a 3.5-inch 640 by 480 screen. Then the Flip comes in with a beautiful 750 by 1334 screen. Personally, I didn't have an issue with the smaller screen on the Retroid Pocket 2S, and I think it looks great. The colors stand out a little bit more and it's a bit more vibrant than something like the 405M. But out of all three, the Flip is the standout winner, and I don't think it's really close. And then, like I mentioned before, the 2S would come in second because I think that panel is a little bit better than the one on the 405M. But some people might have issues with the 3.5-inch screen, so I would choose your own winner in this scenario. One massive benefit to the Flip screen compared to the other two is it opens up your world to a lot more games. Native Android games, local and remote streaming through Moonlight, xCloud, PS Play, and other apps like that, plus the extra screen area and a 16:9 aspect ratio lets you play PSP perfectly. But it goes further than that, because now you can add in Nintendo DS and 3DS, because you can actually do dual screens on it, and it doesn't look terrible compared to the 405M and the 2S. This isn't simply a "this screen is better than the other" conversation. This is most definitely this can do a lot more than the others conversation. Plus, Game Boy Advance games look absolutely fantastic on the flip screen and makes it one of my favorite ways to play Game Boy Advance besides my analog pocket. You're probably saying at this point, yeah, the 3 Plus exists and it's cheaper and it can do all of this already. And you're right, but I don't like the 3 Plus, and I find that the flip being smaller is just a much better fit for what I want out of a device like this. It's pocketable and portable where the 3 Plus isn't, and I find it to be a bit more comfortable than the 3 Plus ever was. Looking at the size comparison between these three, and the flip is actually the smallest of the three in width, but the thickest of the three thanks to the triggers. But the clamshell allows you to not worry about the screen ever. So throwing it in a pocket, in a bag, or anywhere and you're just like, do your worst. The other two have a constant worry about the screen in every situation. And you can use things like the grips I have on them to counter that. But it's just not as satisfying as just closing the lid. Let's jump over into controls, and this is where things start to get interesting. We'll split this up into different sections and we'll talk about the best for each. In the D-pad scenario, the Retroid Pocket 2S wins hands down. The 2S's D-pad is one of the best I've ever used, and it's the same as the one on the Odin 2 and the 3 Plus, so it's just fantastic. This D-pad and the Miu Mini Plus's D-pad are among my favorites. In second place, the RG405M takes it, as the D-pad has some nice pivot, it feels good, and I haven't had any issues with it. The flip, however, takes third. I found the D-pad to be a bit stiff, and then it squeaks quite a bit when pushing certain directions. On the sticks front, it's pretty much the exact same. The 2S's sticks are among my favorites, and once again it's the same that's used on the Odin 2, and they just feel absolutely fantastic. They're Hall effect sticks, so no drift, and they have a nice range of motion, while just feeling absolutely smooth. For second place, it actually might be a tie, and you're gonna hate me for this one. I don't hate the sliders. I actually find them to be pretty accurate and easy to use. I do hate pushing L3 and R3 on them, and I find that to just be awful. However, on the other side, I'm getting tired of switch sticks at this point. And while the 405M has Hall effect switch sticks, they don't offend me, but they're still switch sticks. I think the 405M slightly beats the flip at this point, but it's by a small margin. On the face button front, it's very close to a tie between the three, but I kind of like the 2S's buttons the most, followed closely by the 405M and the flip. And it's weird because I'm pretty sure the flip and the 2S have the same buttons, but something about the 2S feels a little bit better to me. I can't actually explain the reasoning, it's just feeling, but honestly they're all pretty good. For the other buttons like start, select, home, and all of that, the 405M wins easily, and mostly just because it has it easily accessible and they're very big buttons. It's a tie for last between the other two for just having small, hard to reach buttons. Lastly, trigger-wise, it's a tie between the 2S and the flip, as I'm pretty sure they're using the same analog triggers here. 405M is dead last with inline triggers. Even though I don't mind them, they're just obviously not as good as analog triggers. Looking at everything so far, and you might be thinking the flip doesn't seem to be all that great. And you'd be right. It's extremely average in these categories against these other two devices. But we're talking about three extremely good devices instead of bad ones. So it's more of it's a good compared to great scenario. There's something that just hits different when you're holding a clamshell device like this with the screen detached, as the controls just feel better to me. I don't know what it is, but it feels more natural and it's more comfortable. I don't personally think the flip is the most comfortable of the three devices, but it's close enough in the way that I actually really enjoy using it. On the sound side, the 2S wins this single-handedly, and it has front-firing speakers and they sound fantastic. Then second up would be the RG405M. And lastly, we have the Retroid Pocket Flip. The Flip has so much wasted space on the top that has been talked about to death, but just put the speaker there next time. Looking at games now, and while the 405M has had great updates with Gamma OS, and that's what I'm using, the Flip is still the best of the three when it comes to performance and Android as a whole. All three are basically within the same numbers performance-wise, so we're talking small gains here. But like I mentioned before, the Flip gets that added benefit from being able to comfortably play more games than the other two can. They're just not really playable on the 405M or 2S in a good way. So that first example here would be Nintendo DS, and you can have both screens on the Flip, but it's not really something you can do on the 2S or 405M. And so DS here on the Flip and using Melon DS for retro achievements just feels great. And of course, this would all apply to the 3DS as well. It's basically a tie between the other two because you're left having to swap screens, or if you want both screens on, you're here with a magnifying glass trying to read everything. And now we look at PSP, which shines on the Flip, compared to the 2S, which I wouldn't even consider, and the 405M, which is fine, but it's super hard to read a lot of text. The Flip is just a natural winner in this category for the 16:9 screen and a bigger screen. Lastly, there's native Android games like Dead Cells, and you can see here that we can actually play them on the Flip in their proper aspect ratio without having to deal with squished nonsense like on the 405M or the 2S. Then you add in Moonlight Streaming, xCloud, PS Play, and all of that, and you have a fantastic pocketable device that can do Android gaming as well as cloud streaming on a very small budget. The same ranking continues with every other platform as we move on down. PlayStation 1, Super Nintendo, the Game Boys, especially Game Boy Advance and all of that, just plays better on the Flip compared to the other two in my opinion. And that's as long as you don't mind the black bars that happen because of aspect ratio. If you happen to be somebody that has a concern with that, then it might be a different story, but I just don't have that issue. I'm not keeping track of the tally here, but I'm going to add a vote for 1,000 points that just gives the Flip the win, because that's how I feel. So in the case of the RG405M versus the Retroid Pocket 2S, I find the Retroid Pocket Flip to be the winner. But if I had to pick one from these other two devices, I think for me the Retroid Pocket 2S would be the winner. And it's the main reason that it does everything that the 405M does in a cheaper package with better sticks, better sound, and better triggers, and all of that all for cheaper. Like, you can't really overstate how good that is at almost half the price. So if I was somebody just coming into this hobby and I was looking at these three devices, I would likely go with the 2S as my first choice. But I would highly suggest that you look at the Retroid Pocket Flip as an alternative. And while it's a lot more money, for me, it's a much better option as a daily device. I just love the Flip. That's all I had for this video. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think out of all three? Most of you are probably looking at the 405M versus 2S, so if you've made a decision already, let me know which one you picked and why. If you haven't made a decision already, did I sell you on the Flip a little bit? Because honestly, I wasn't sold on clamshell devices at all until I picked this up. And now I can't imagine playing anything without it. Don't forget to like and sub to help the channel grow, and hope you all have a good one.